My name is Elizabeth, and today I turned 27. What should have been a joyful birthday dinner at an upscale Chicago restaurant quickly turned into the most shocking night of my life. As my parents sat nervously across from me, my billionaire grandfather, Jack, who almost never showed up to family gatherings, smiled warmly and asked, "Is the apartment comfortable?" Confused, I replied, "What apartment?" In that instant, my parents froze. The smile vanished from Grandpa's face as he turned to them, his voice calm but chilling. "Then where did the money go?" If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit like and subscribe to hear the story of the betrayal that shattered my family and changed my life forever. Up until that night, I thought I was living a normal, if slightly difficult, life. I worked as a graphic designer at a small agency in downtown Chicago. My paycheck barely covered my bills, but it gave me just enough to enjoy a coffee treat here and there. My apartment was far from glamorous, a 2-bedroom in a rundown building I shared with my roommate, Olivia. Rent was steep, even split between us, but that's city living. Still, our home had personality, mismatched thrift store furniture and walls filled with posters, prints, and photos that made it uniquely ours. Even though I had a billionaire grandfather, I took pride in making my own way. My parents, Harold and Diane, lived comfortably in the suburbs with their 5-bedroom house, backyard pool, and twice-a-year luxury vacations. I assumed they could afford it because Dad was a senior executive at an insurance company and Mom was a successful real estate agent. They never offered financial help, always saying it was important to earn what you wanted. When I graduated art school with nearly $70,000 in student loans, they congratulated me on stepping into adulthood. While other parents helped their kids with rent or down payments, mine handed me a copy of a finance book and told me that struggle builds character. I didn't hate them for it, not really. I wanted to prove I could survive on my own. But whenever I saw them driving new luxury cars or talking about their next remodel, I couldn't help but wonder why they were so unwilling to help me when I was barely scraping by. Grandpa Jack was an enigma. He had built his empire in real estate from nothing, creating one of the largest property companies in the Midwest. Stern and intimidating, he rarely showed up at family events, and when he did, everyone seemed terrified of saying the wrong thing. But beneath his gruff exterior, he had always treated me with surprising warmth. On the rare occasions we talked, he asked real questions about my design work, and actually listened. My cousin Amelia was the opposite. She lived off a trust fund, flaunting her lavish lifestyle on social media, posting photos from 5-star resorts and designer shopping trips. At family gatherings, she made sure everyone knew just how different her life was from mine. The week before my birthday had been especially rough. My design agency lost its biggest client, and I was one of 5 employees laid off. With barely 2 months' worth of savings, I was terrified about how I'd pay rent while scrambling for another job in a cutthroat industry. So when my parents insisted on taking me to a fancy restaurant for my birthday, I tried to decline. I suggested something simple, like takeout at my apartment. But they pushed hard, saying 27 was a milestone and deserved a real celebration. Looking back now, their urgency makes a twisted kind of sense. The signs had been there all along. Little moments I brushed off, like when I mentioned grad school and my dad instantly shut it down, saying I already had too much debt. Or when my mom changed the subject anytime I brought up my financial struggles. There were hushed phone calls that went silent when I walked into the room, and heavy tension whenever Grandpa's name came up. A few months before, I had caught my mom looking at properties in Panama. When I asked if they were planning a trip, she quickly closed her laptop and said she was just daydreaming. Around the same time, Dad started making vague comments about traveling more and not seeing me as often. The morning of my birthday, Olivia, my roommate and best friend since college, gave me a handmade card and a small potted plant I'd been eyeing at the local nursery. She knew better than anyone how hard I'd been working just to stay afloat. That night, she even helped me put together an outfit for my modest wardrobe so I'd look presentable at dinner. I had no idea that in just a few hours, everything I thought I knew about my family would be torn apart. I didn't know the financial struggles I'd endured for years were unnecessary. And as I applied mascara and slipped on my one decent pair of earrings, I couldn't possibly imagine that I was about to uncover the most painful betrayal of my life. The restaurant my parents chose for my birthday dinner was one of those places where the menu doesn't bother listing prices, which instantly made me uneasy. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the tables were dressed in crisp white linens. The hostess led us to a table in the center of the dining room, where a chilled bottle of champagne already waited, arranged in advance by my parents. I felt out of place in my simple black dress and the same heels I'd worn to job interviews for the last 3 years. My mother wore a designer outfit I had never seen before, with a necklace that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My father sat beside her in an expensive-looking suit, his gold cufflinks catching the light whenever he lifted his glass. From the start, the conversation felt forced. They asked polite questions about my job search, but quickly steered away whenever I shared anything real. Instead, they kept returning to safe topics, a movie they'd watched, or distant relatives I barely remembered. After we ordered, they presented me with gifts, a designer wallet and a beautiful scarf. Thoughtful, yes, but strangely modest compared to the extravagant restaurant they had chosen. I thanked them, and right on cue, my mother launched into her usual lecture about financial responsibility and the importance of building good credit. Halfway through my entree, nodding along to yet another story from my father's college days, the atmosphere around us suddenly shifted. People at nearby tables straightened in their chairs. The staff grew unusually attentive. I turned to see what had caused it, and spotted him instantly. Grandpa Jack had arrived. He was accompanied, as always, by his assistant, Luna, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s who never strayed far from his side. At 82, Jack still cut. An imposing figure, tall, straight-backed, with a full head of silver hair. His perfectly tailored suit probably cost more than my yearly salary, and his mere presence commanded the room without a word. My parents froze mid-conversation, their faces flickering from surprise to something that looked almost like fear. My father scrambled to his feet so quickly he nearly knocked over his glass. "Jack, this is unexpected. We weren't sure you'd make it," he said, his voice pitched higher than usual. Grandpa ignored him completely. His stern expression softened only when his eyes landed on me. Leaning down, he kissed my cheek. "Happy birthday, Elizabeth," he said warmly. 27 years. Hard to believe how quickly time passes. "Thank you, Grandpa," I replied, touched that he had remembered. "It means a lot that you came." He settled into the empty seat beside me. Luna remained standing nearby, tablet in hand, as if ready to take notes at any moment. "I wanted to check in, see how things are going," Jack said, studying my face with eyes that missed nothing. "Luna tells me the quarterly reports for your investment portfolio look strong. The trust should be performing well in this market." I blinked, confused. "Investment portfolio? Trust?" A crease formed between his brows. "Yes, the trust fund created when you were born. You turned 25 2 years ago, so everything should have been transferred to you by now." He spoke as though it were obvious. But across the table, my parents had gone stiff. My mother's knuckles whitened around her fork. My father stared at his plate. "I think there's some confusion," I said slowly, looking between them. "I don't have a trust fund." Jack's expression barely changed, but his eyes sharpened. "Of course you do. All the cousins have one. Yours was the largest, 5 million initially, plus growth. Managed by your parents until your 25th birthday, when control was supposed to pass to you." The room around me seemed to dissolve. $5 million? A trust fund I never knew existed? My pulse pounded in my ears. "And the apartment in Gold Coast," Jack added, his voice calm but his gaze now pinned on my parents. "Is it comfortable?" "I chose that building for its security and the views of the lake." I stared at him, my throat tight. "What apartment?" The silence that followed was crushing. My father's face had gone pale. My mother looked like she might be sick. Jack's calm expression never wavered, but there was a dangerous stillness in him now, like the air before a storm breaks. "You don't know about the apartment," he said flatly. "The 2-bedroom corner unit in Lakeside Tower. Purchased 2 years ago as your 25th birthday gift." I shook my head slowly, my mind spinning. Jack turned to my parents with deliberate slowness, his voice dropping to a tone quieter, and far more chilling, than if he had shouted. "Then tell me, where did the money go?" My father swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Jack, there's been a misunderstanding. We can explain everything." Jack's eyes narrowed. "I sincerely hope so." My grandfather's voice cut through the tension, his tone making it clear no answer would satisfy him. He turned to his assistant. "Luna, call Stanley. Have him meet us here immediately." "Already done, sir," Luna replied smoothly. "He was at a dinner nearby and should arrive within 10 minutes. I've also contacted security at the office to pull the financial records you requested." By now, the other diners were openly staring, our family drama far more entertaining than their overpriced meals. A waiter hovered nervously, unsure whether to approach. My mother reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away, a sick weight forming in my stomach. "Elizabeth, sweetheart, this isn't how we wanted to tell you." "Tell me what?" I snapped, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "That I have a trust fund and an apartment I never knew about? Or that you deliberately hid them from me?" My father glanced nervously at the watching diners. "This isn't the place to discuss family matters." "I agree," Jack said coldly. "Luna, arrange a private room." Then he looked at me, his expression softening just enough. "Elizabeth, I promise you'll get answers tonight. All of them." As Luna spoke quietly to the restaurant manager, I sat in stunned silence, struggling to reconcile years of financial struggle with what I had just learned. Why would my parents hide this? What had they done with money meant for me? And how could I ever trust them again? The private dining room was paneled in dark wood, with a long table that could seat 12, making our small group feel even more isolated. Jack took the head of the table, placing me at his right. My parents sat across from me, both looking like they wanted to disappear. Luna stood near the door, tablet in hand, her face unreadable. Moments later, Stanley Thornton, my grandfather's longtime attorney, arrived. A balding man with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he carried a leather briefcase that he placed carefully on the table. I brought the original trust documents, he said, as well as the most recent financial statements. Jack nodded. Good. Let's start from the beginning, for Elizabeth's sake. Stanley cleared his throat and spoke directly to me. When you were born, your grandfather established a trust fund in your name with an initial deposit of $5 million. The arrangement was simple. Your parents would manage the trust until your 25th birthday, at which point full control would transfer to you. Before then, the money could only be used for your education, health, or general welfare, with all expenses documented and approved. I stared at him in disbelief. And no one thought to tell me this? Your parents were instructed to inform you when you turned 18, Stanley said, glancing toward them. Judging by your reaction, I assume they did not. They did not, Jack confirmed, his voice tight with restrained fury. Nor, it seems, did they transfer control when Elizabeth turned 25. What is the trust worth today? Stanley pulled several papers from his briefcase. As of 3 months ago, the trust was valued at roughly $8.3 million. That includes the original principal, investment growth, minus authorized expenditures for college tuition and the purchase of the Gold Coast apartment 2 years ago. $8.3 million. The number echoed in my mind, unreal. While I had been working overtime and skipping meals to pay rent, millions of dollars, my money, existed for my supposed benefit. I want to see proof of every withdrawal over the last 5 years, Jack demanded. As Stanley spread more documents across the table, my father finally spoke. Jack, we can explain. There were investments that didn't perform as expected. The money is just temporarily allocated elsewhere. Allocated where, exactly? Jack asked, his voice deadly calm. My mother broke down. Harold, just tell the truth. She turned to Jack, tears filling her eyes. After the recession, there were financial difficulties. We had to make adjustments. By stealing from your daughter? Jack's tone was ice. It wasn't stealing, my father protested weakly. We were her parents. We thought we were acting in her best interest. But I finally found my voice. By letting me drown in student loans, crammed into a tiny apartment with a roommate, while you lived in a 5-bedroom house with a pool? By watching me panic over rent while you bought new cars and took luxury vacations? How exactly was that in my best interest? Luna quietly set a glass of water in front of me. I hadn't even realized. I was shaking until I tried to lift it and nearly spilled. Stanley was still studying the financial records, his frown deepening. He cleared his throat. There appear to be numerous unauthorized withdrawals starting about 7 years ago. Large sums transferred into Harold and Diane's personal accounts. He looked up, his expression grim. Based on my preliminary review, it looks like all but about $300,000 has been drained from the trust. The room went silent. $8 million reduced to $300,000. My stomach turned. I felt physically sick. Where is the money now? Jack asked, his calm voice edged with fury. My father stared at his hands. Some went to pay off our mortgage. Some for cars, home renovations, investments in Diane's real estate business, vacations, the house in Florida. My mother added softly. Memories hit me all at once, twisted in this new light. My parents refusing to help with the deposit on my first apartment, insisting student loans built character when I cried over the payments. My mother showing off her new Mercedes while I rode the bus because I couldn't afford a car. And all that time, they had millions meant for me. You let me suffer, I whispered. All those years, all those sleepless nights worrying about money. You watched me juggle 2 jobs in college. You saw how terrified I was about losing my job last week. And the whole time, you were living off my trust fund. My money. It wasn't like that, my mother cried, tears streaming down her face. We always planned to pay it back. Things just got out of hand. Out of hand? I repeated, incredulous. You stole nearly $8 million from me. Jack placed a steady hand on my arm. Luna, call Detective Ramirez. He's still in financial crimes, isn't he? No, my father blurted. There's no need to involve the police. This is family business. Theft is not family business. Jack replied coldly. especially at this scale. Please, my mother begged. We can fix this. We'll sell the house, the cars, we'll pay it back. Jack looked at me. Elizabeth, it's your decision. They stole from you. Whether or not to press charges is your call. I looked at the people who had raised me, people I had trusted completely, and felt the first cracks of betrayal splitting open inside me. I knew the wound would never fully heal. I need time, I managed. I can't process this right now. Jack nodded. Reasonable. He turned to Stanley. Freeze all their assets. Nothing moves without my approval. And I want a full forensic accounting of every dollar that left that trust. Already underway, Luna said briskly. The team will work through the night. And the apartment? Stanley asked. Change the locks immediately, Jack ordered. New keys only for Elizabeth. My father made one last desperate attempt. Jack, be reasonable. Where are we supposed to go? My grandfather fixed him with a glare sharp enough to cut stone. You have a 5-bedroom house bought with stolen money. Enjoy it while you can. The real estate fraud unit will be very interested in how you titled property purchased with trust funds. A knock at the door broke the silence. The restaurant manager peeked in nervously. Do you need anything else? Just the check, Jack said, dismissing him. We're done here. As the manager slipped out, I scanned the table. My parents avoided my gaze. My grandfather sat steady beside me. Luna and Stanley remained calm and efficient in the middle of this family disaster. And me? I knew nothing would ever be the same. The foundations of my life had been exposed as lies, and I had no idea what would remain standing when the dust settled. The car ride home was suffocating. I had turned down Jack's offer to stay at one of his properties. I needed the fragile comfort of my own small apartment. When the taxi pulled away, I glanced back. My parents stood frozen on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, suddenly looking small and fragile under the harsh streetlight. Inside my apartment, Olivia took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. She guided me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and waited while I struggled for words. My parents stole $8 million from me. The words sounded absurd even as I said them. Then everything tumbled out, the trust fund I never knew about, the apartment that was supposed to be mine, the years of struggle that never had to happen. As I spoke, shock gave way to a searing, bone-deep anger I had never felt before. I applied for food stamps last year, I said, my voice breaking. I lived on ramen 4 nights a week while they used my trust fund to remodel their kitchen and buy luxury cars. Olivia held my hand tight as I cycled through shock, rage, and grief. She made tea that sat untouched, growing cold. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from my parents, which I ignored. The only message I answered was from Jack, checking that I was safe and asking if I needed anything. The next morning, Luna called with updates. Jack's legal team was moving fast. They had already confirmed that the Florida house, my parents' primary residence, and both of their cars had all been purchased with money from my trust. A forensic accountant was tracing every withdrawal and transfer. Early findings suggested about $300,000 remained of the original trust, Luna explained in her usual brisk, efficient tone. The rest had gone into real estate, luxury items, and reckless investments that had collapsed. The days that followed blurred together. I put my job search on hold, too consumed by the unfolding disaster to think about anything else. Each morning, Jack sent a car to bring me to meetings, first with attorneys, then financial advisors, and finally with a therapist who specialized in family betrayal. A week after my birthday, we discovered my parents had bought plane tickets to Panama just 3 days before the dinner. They had planned to flee right after the celebration, clearly realizing Jack could expose them at any moment. The only reason they stayed was to keep up appearances until after my birthday, knowing Jack might attend. The family split along predictable lines. My father's siblings rushed to defend him, calling it bad financial choices rather than outright theft. My mother's side was more divided. Her sister even called me directly to apologize for what her sibling had done. But the biggest surprise came from my cousin Amelia. She appeared at my apartment one afternoon, looking subdued. Sitting uncomfortably on my worn couch, she admitted, I always wondered why Uncle Harold and Aunt Diane seemed to live so much better when Dad said our trusts were the same size. I guess now we know. Amelia's trust had been properly managed but was much smaller than mine had been. She had stretched her money carefully, while presenting a lifestyle online that looked far more glamorous than reality. I was always jealous of how close you seemed with your parents, she confessed. Mine were honest about money but never really there for me. I thought you had both, love and wealth. I never imagined they were stealing from you. That conversation sparked an unexpected bond with Amelia, one small light in the heavy darkness consuming my life. Meanwhile, the legal case pushed forward. Jack's team confirmed again that only about $300,000 was left. The rest had vanished into my parents' lavish spending and failed ventures. Both houses were seized, as well as their vehicles, the boat, and even my mother's extensive jewelry collection. Through all of this, my parents kept trying to reach me. Their messages shifted from justifications to desperate begging. My father called from hotel rooms, saying they had nowhere to go. My mother sent long emails insisting it was all somehow for my benefit, though she never explained how luxury cars and designer clothes had ever helped me. Eventually, the media picked up the story. A business outlet ran a short piece about Jack Harrington's family dispute, hinting at major misappropriation of trust funds. They didn't name me, but the implication was clear. I deleted my social media accounts, unable to face the whispers and speculation. The worst part wasn't the exposure, it was the guilt that haunted me. Was I partly to blame? Should I have seen the signs? Was I wrong to let Jack's legal team pursue them so aggressively? The therapist Jack hired told me this guilt was a common reaction for victims of betrayal. Understanding didn't make the feelings any less crushing. 3 weeks later, Jack invited me to dinner at his penthouse. Despite its luxury, the space felt warm and personal. He poured our drinks himself, sending the staff away for privacy. Looking me directly in the eye, he said, "None of this is your fault. Your parents made their choices. They betrayed you, and they betrayed me. I keep thinking I should have known." I admitted there had been signs. "You had no reason to suspect your own parents," Jack replied firmly. "Especially when you didn't even know the money existed." That night, he showed me photos I had never seen: my grandmother, who died before I could remember her. My mother as a little girl, perched on his shoulders in a park. Jack as a young man, hammer in hand, building his first development. "Family is complicated," he said softly. "Your grandmother and I didn't always agree on how to raise your mother. I was too strict, too focused on work. Maybe if I had been different, she might have developed a healthier view of money." It was the most vulnerable I had ever seen him. And in that moment, I understood, the betrayal ran deeper than my own pain. My parents had stolen not only from me, but also from the father who had tried to protect our future. 1 month after my birthday, I agreed to face them. The mediation was held at Jack's attorney's sleek downtown office. My parents looked smaller somehow, worn down by the past month. My father's face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched a modest purse. Gone were the designer clothes. Most of them had already been sold. The massive conference room only amplified their frailty. Jack sat beside me, flanked by his attorneys. My parents had just one lawyer, a nervous man who kept shuffling papers. The forensic accountants presented their findings with cold precision. Charts and graphs laid bare the systematic draining of my trust over 7 years, small withdrawals growing into massive ones, funding homes, cars, vacations, my mother's failed real estate venture, and my father's disastrous day trading. As the evidence mounted, my father grew defensive, while my mother silently wept, staring at the table. When the presentation ended, Jack turned to them. "The accounting is complete. We know where every dollar went. The only question now is whether this remains a civil matter, or becomes criminal." Their lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "My clients are prepared to cooperate fully. They understand the seriousness of their actions and wish to make amends." "Amends?" I finally spoke, my voice breaking the heavy silence for the first time. "You stole my future. You watched me struggle while living off money that was meant for me. So tell me, how do you plan to make this right?" My father couldn't even meet my eyes. "Elizabeth," he said, voice low, "we never meant for things to go this far. It started small. Just borrowing a little to get through a rough patch. Then, it got easier to take a little more, and then a little more." My mother added softly, "We convinced ourselves we deserved it, for raising you, for all the sacrifices we made as parents. We told ourselves we'd pay it back before you ever knew." "And the apartment?" I asked. "The one Grandpa bought for me 2 years ago. What was your plan there?" They exchanged guilty glances. My father sighed. "We were renting it out. The income went into our account." The betrayal hit me all over again. While I shared a cramped apartment with a roommate, they were collecting rent on a luxury property meant for me. Jack placed a steadying hand on my shoulder before addressing my parents. "Here are your options. Option 1, you sign over every remaining asset purchased with trust fund money, cooperate fully with recovery efforts, and agree to a structured repayment plan for what can't be recovered immediately. In return, Elizabeth agrees not to press criminal charges." My parents nodded quickly. "Option 2, Jack continued, his voice hardening, you keep hiding and defending your actions. Then we proceed with criminal charges, fraud, embezzlement, theft. The evidence is overwhelming. You'd both face serious prison time." "We'll take option 1, my father said at once. "We'll cooperate completely." Jack looked at me. "Elizabeth, the decision is yours." I studied my parents. These were the people who raised me, who tucked me in at night, who cheered at my graduations. And yet, they had stolen from me, piece by piece, while I struggled to survive. The emotions tore at me. "I don't want you in prison," I finally said. "But I want every penny recovered. And I want you to admit what you did, not just to me, but to the entire family." Over the next several hours, the legal details were finalized. My parents signed document after document, transferring assets and agreeing to Jack's terms. By the end of the day, I legally owned their Florida house, which would be sold, along with many of their possessions for liquidation. When the attorneys stepped out, I found myself alone with them for the first time since my birthday. "Why?" I asked simply. "How could you do this?" My mother reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. "We got caught up in a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Your father made bad investments early on, and we were always trying to keep up appearances. When we gained access to your trust, it seemed like an easy solution, just a little to get ahead. But it never stopped." My father looked ashamed. "We have a problem with money, Elizabeth. With spending, with status. We need help. Professional help. That doesn't excuse what we did to you. But maybe it explains it." It wasn't enough. No explanation could ever be enough. But it was a start, a tiny crack in the wall of betrayal. That stood between us. 2 weeks later, I moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment purchased with part of the recovered funds. It wasn't the luxury Gold Coast property that should have been mine, but it was mine, free and clear, no mortgage, no rent. Jack had helped me choose it, making sure it had security and a good location near public transit. With his guidance, I began learning about financial management. The recovered assets, including the Florida house and various liquidated possessions, came to just over $1 million. A fraction of what the trust should have been, but still life-changing for someone who'd been living paycheck to paycheck. A new job came through one of Jack's connections, a respected design firm, with better pay and real potential. At first, I worried it was nepotism. But Jack reminded me, he got me the interview. The job itself, I had earned. As spring turned to summer, I built new routines and firm boundaries. I allowed only limited contact with my parents, brief calls. No visits. They had moved into a small rental and were both in therapy for what professionals called financial addiction. A term I had never heard before, but one that fit. Jack and I grew closer. Our weekly dinners became a fixture in my life. He taught me about investments and business with the same precision that had made him successful. I began to see beyond his stern exterior, to the complex, caring man underneath. Luna, his longtime assistant, also surprised me by becoming a friend. She had stories about Jack that humanized him, and she became a mentor in her own right, helping me navigate office politics and career growth with her trademark efficiency. Most unexpectedly, Thomas, an old friend from college, reappeared. He spotted me at a coffee shop near my new apartment, and reconnecting with him felt like finding an anchor in stormy seas. He had no ties to my family drama, no expectations. With him, I could just be Elizabeth, not the victim of betrayal. Just me. As summer faded into fall, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Not just for financial stability, but for a life that was truly mine, built on honesty, not lies. 6 months after the truth came out, I was thriving in ways I never imagined. At the design firm, I had moved from a basic graphic design role to leading a small team on a national rebranding project. The creative director valued my input and trusted my ideas. Jack had helped me secure my financial foundation. The $1.2 million in recovered assets was carefully invested, with a portion reserved for immediate security. I had a retirement account, real health insurance, and an emergency fund that could sustain me for a year. For someone who once counted pennies, the stability was almost surreal. I still hesitated over small purchases, old habits lingering despite the change. My parents, meanwhile, were living with the fallout of their choices. They downsized dramatically, now in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. My father had taken a job at a small insurance agency, far from the executive life he once had. My mother had surrendered her real estate license as part of the legal settlement and was now working as an administrative assistant. But the social fallout had been the hardest part for my parents. Friends they had known for years pulled away once the truth spread through their circle. They were no longer welcome at country club events or charity galas that once filled their calendar. After months of avoiding them, I finally agreed to meet for coffee at a neutral cafe. They arrived early, visibly uneasy, bringing no gifts, only a quiet determination to reconnect. "We've been working with our therapist on making amends," my mother said, gripping her coffee cup. "Not just to you, but to Jack, and even to ourselves. We know we can't erase what we did. We're also learning boundaries with money," my father added. "Separate accounts, strict budgets, accountability partners. It's like recovering from any other addiction." I listened more than I spoke, watching carefully. There was a humility in them I'd never seen before, an absence of the designer labels and status symbols they once clung to. Before we parted, my mother asked if we might establish some regular contact, maybe a monthly lunch. I told her I'd consider it. I wasn't ready to commit, but I wasn't completely closed to the possibility either. That fall, Jack suffered a minor health scare. His doctor's warning about blood pressure forced him to change his lifestyle and cut back on work. The experience softened him even more, making him reflect deeply on family. Despite the pain my parents had caused, your grandmother always said family is worth fighting for, he told me one evening over dinner. Not at the cost of your self-respect or safety, but worth the effort of understanding and forgiveness when it's possible. Through him, I was learning resilience. Jack had been deeply hurt by my parents, yet he remained steady in my life. He never let his disappointment in them affect his bond with me. With his encouragement, I launched a small side business in graphic design consulting, helping startups that couldn't afford big agencies. The work was challenging but rewarding, and it gave me something of my own, completely separate from family connections or recovered funds. My confidence was slowly rebuilding, both professionally and personally. Therapy, which had started as damage control, had grown into a tool for deeper healing. I was beginning to trust myself again, to see clearly that I was a victim not because of weakness, but because the people I trusted had made devastating choices. 6 months after my birthday, the day everything unraveled, Jack surprised me with a dinner. He reserved a private room at an upscale restaurant. But this time, the atmosphere was warm, not tense. When I walked in, I found Jack, Luna Stanley, my cousin Amelia, and even Thomas waiting for me. 6 months ago, your life changed in ways no one could have imagined, Jack said, raising a glass. Tonight, we celebrate not what was lost, but what you've built from the ashes. After dinner, he handed me a small box. Inside was a key and the deed to a new apartment. The Gold Coast property was sold as part of the recovery, he explained. This one is entirely yours, chosen for the life you're living now, not the one that was taken from you. The gesture moved me to tears, not for its monetary value, but because it symbolized a fresh start, free from betrayal. My relationship with Amelia had shifted, too. No longer shadowed by rivalry, we discovered shared interests and a genuine friendship. She even invested in my business, with Jack structuring the deal so it was fair for both of us. I used to think you had the perfect family, Amelia admitted over lunch one afternoon. It's strange how we envied each other for things that weren't even real. Thomas had also become more than a friend. Our coffee catch-ups turned into long dinners and late-night conversations. Through the darkest days, he hadn't tried to fix me or gloss over my pain, he simply showed up, steady and patient. When he kissed me for the first time during a walk along the lakeshore near my new apartment, it felt like stepping into a part of my life untouched by betrayal. This was something new, built honestly from the start. I also used part of the recovered funds to create a small mentorship program for young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering scholarships and training. It was still in its early stages, but helping others break through financial barriers gave me a sense of purpose beyond my own healing. As fall turned to winter, I realized the betrayal would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I was building a life shaped by truth, not lies. 1 year after that birthday, I stood in a place I never imagined I'd reach. Not only financially stable, but emotionally stronger, with clearer boundaries and deeper, more authentic relationships than I'd ever had before. The healing wasn't a straight path. Some days, anger still surged up, the pain feeling as raw as ever. But those moments came less often, slowly overshadowed by the full life I was creating. Even with my parents, a fragile reconciliation had begun. We met monthly for lunch, with clear boundaries. They continued therapy and made small but steady restitution payments that Jack's team had arranged. I never thought I'd sit across from them again without rage in my chest. But here I was, cautiously, but undeniably, proving that some broken bonds could be mended, piece by piece. I admitted this to my therapist during one of our now bi-weekly sessions. It wasn't forgetting, and it wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was something close to peace. The financial lessons Jack had given me completely reshaped how I saw money. I managed my investments with confidence now, balancing security with growth. The trust funds that remained, though far smaller than they should have been, were handled carefully, providing stability for the future while allowing me to live comfortably today. Jack had suffered another health scare, more serious than the first, that put him in the hospital for a short while. Facing his fragility forced perspective onto all of us. Despite the betrayal, despite the legal fallout, he was still my grandfather. And my parents' father. Time with him was limited, and that made it precious even under the shadow of the past. During his recovery, I spent hours at his bedside, listening to stories of his early years, his love for my grandmother, his regrets, and his triumphs. Those conversations deepened my understanding of him and of the complicated family dynamics that had shaped us all. They didn't excuse my parents' actions, but they added layers to a story I thought I already knew. Meanwhile, my design career was thriving. My side business had grown enough that I was considering making it my full-time focus. I had already hired 2 junior designers and brought in a business manager to handle the parts of the work I had no passion for. The mentorship program had also expanded. 5 young designers now received scholarships and professional guidance. Watching them grow in both confidence and skill gave me a fulfillment unlike anything I'd known in my professional life. Thomas and I had been growing closer, too. Our relationship was built on transparency, something I realized had been missing from most of my past relationships, both romantic and familial. He had his own apartment, but most nights he spent with me. Our lives weaving together in a way that felt natural and unforced. "You know what amazes me most about you?" he asked one night as we cooked dinner together. "How you've taken something that could have made you bitter, and turned it into growth instead." My apartment had become a true home, filled with art, books, and colors that brought me joy. Modest compared to what I might have inherited had the trust remained intact, but fully mine in a way that the Gold Coast property never could have been. My cousin Amelia and I had built a genuine friendship, something that surprised us both. The false competition of our past had given way to support and mutual respect. She even joined the board of the mentorship program, contributing both funds and connections. On the anniversary of the revelation, I hosted a small gathering in my apartment. Jack was there, friendlier than I wanted to admit, but sharp as ever. Amelia, Thomas, Luna, and a few close friends from work filled the space. My parents were absent, not because they weren't invited, but because they knew this milestone wasn't theirs to claim. As we shared a meal around my dining table, I looked at the people who had become my chosen family. A wave of gratitude swelled inside me. "A year ago, I thought my life was destroyed," I said, raising my glass. "What I've learned since is that when the foundation is revealed to be false, you get the chance to build something true in its place." Jack nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. "To truth," he said, raising his glass, "to truth." Everyone echoed. Later, after the guests had left, only Thomas remained, helping me load the dishwasher in quiet companionship. I thought about the deeper lessons of the past year. I had learned that financial wealth, though valuable for security, wasn't the richest currency. Trust, authenticity, and self-knowledge were worth far more, and once broken, were infinitely harder to rebuild. I had learned that forgiveness isn't one single act, but a process. It doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but it does eventually lighten the heavy burden of anger. And above all, I had learned that while we can't always choose what happens to us, we do have full sovereignty over how we respond, and what we create from both the blessings and the wreckage. The betrayal would always be a chapter in my story, but not the defining one. It was the chapter that forced me to take control of my narrative, and to write the rest with purpose and honesty. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you for listening. Have you ever faced a betrayal that, in the end, led to unexpected growth? Or had to rebuild trust after it was broken? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it, and if this story resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need the reminder that even the deepest betrayals can lead to new beginnings. Because sometimes, it's the hardest truths that finally set us free.